Welcome to the MFR Coaches podcast, where we talk about how you can create a six-figure MFR practice. I'm your host, Heather Hommel. Not only have I been practicing MFR for 11 years, I'm also a life and business coach, especially for MFR therapists. My goal is for you to understand how to get fully booked, how to talk to your clients, and how to make sure they understand what's possible for them with MFR treatment. I'm here to help you stop under-earning, overworking, and burning out. I'll lend support so you can create the MFR practice you've always wanted. Learn how you can do it too, even if you live in a tiny town, and even if you're just starting out, and even if you've ran your practice for years. Let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the MFR Coaches podcast. I am joined today by one of my newer students, Cassandra Sohn. She is the owner of Sohn MFR in Greater San Diego, California. She is a holistic health practitioner, and she has been in the program for just over 40 days at the time of this interview. Cassandra, welcome in. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be recording you. One, because you are brand new to the program. You've already been having a lot of success with some of the things we teach and having a lot of breakthroughs in your business. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what your business has been like up until when you joined coaching?
Well, I've been in business for a long time, and I switched to MFR only. I do lymphatic drainage as well, but I went away from massage therapy like 10 years ago, and I lost every client I had.
Yeah.
All
no
of them
problem.
loved me. So anyway, it's been a process of rebuilding, and it's kind of been an interesting experience because it's just been, I don't want to say limping along, but kind of limping along.
Why do you think that has been like that?
Personal things with family that we were trying to help out. I think there's a lot of things that really kind of added to it. Kind of myself, just in general too. You know, all these
What was that like for you when you switched to MFR only and all of your clients left? Was that kind of part of the problem? Just what you were thinking about that, having had?
It was devastating. I was like, I have no business, like zero,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
I think I had one or two clients that stayed with me, and all of a sudden I was like, I don't have anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it was like, I'm in a lease agreement and I have to come up with this money that I don't have. I mean, and I know you've talked about how the business doesn't pay for the personal, but I was like, I'm not bringing in any money to pay for the personal things that, you know, my spouse and I split and whatever. It was hard.
Yeah. Well, and like, just to be clear on like your business not being responsible for your personal life, what I mean by that is like, you cannot take every penny that your business makes and like to fund your personal life. Like you definitely have to have a clear owner's pay, and your business can be responsible for your owner's pay, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. No, and that I understand. But like at the time I was taking, you know,
Yeah.
and I was just taking everything else.
Yeah. I think most people do that because we don't really have any formal business training. And even if you do have a degree in business, nobody really teaches you how to run a business or what it's like. How do you manage your money in the business as well? So,
and I do have a degree, and I was just thinking about this. I do have a degree in business. And so like my husband and I, we would talk about it, and he's like, I don't understand this. He goes, you're a great therapist, but why are you not busier? I'm like, I didn't have an answer for it.
yeah. Well, I think just as a coach, like looking in, like knowing this information of, you know, was your business really thriving when you were doing massage and lymphatic drainage only, like before you switched to MFR?
So it was enough to cover everything with a little bit extra. It wasn't a huge thriving business, no, but it was enough to cover my expenses.
Yeah, which I think a lot of us are totally fine with, and we don't even know what else is possible because we're so busy covering our basics and getting just enough that we live on just enough all the time. And it's a lot of work to have it. So we can't even imagine having more because it just seems like more work. At least that's how my brain used to work. I just remember when I had $2,000 in my business bank account and I was like telling everybody, I was like, I have $2,000. And that was like so much money. It was so much money. It was wild. So I was reminiscing about that the other day.
I think too, though, like I didn't raise my rates for like 10 years.
Yeah. And what was your rate even set on?
So when I originally started, it was $85 an hour. Now, I live in one of the most expensive city areas or counties in the country.
Yeah.
And I didn't raise it for 10 years. Like, I was just like, oh my goodness. I'm just, yeah.
Probably because you're like, people are going to leave if I raise my rate.
Right.
And you have all this evidence of everybody leaving.
Exactly.
Yeah. So interesting. Okay. So you went MFR only, all your clients left. And then how long have you been doing MFR only? Has it been 10 years? Like,
Well,
what's
about
the
10 years.
timeline?
Yeah. I actually had a friend who's an MFR therapist and another friend who is a doula. And they were like, well, my friend who was an MFR therapist, she's like, you should take the women's health course. And I was like, and at the time I was like, I'm happy to work on female athletes, but I don't know that I want to work on women. And my friend who's a doula, she's like, your skills would be really great in this area. And I was like, and they kind of just kept at me.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how the transition happened, was they just kept at me, you should really do this, you should really do this. And I had some physical some physical issues. And I was like, I can't be the only woman out there that's having issues like these. And that's kind of how I transitioned into, because then I remember that year, like I took like 8 courses that year. Like I did vacation courses and whatever, just so I could get all the requirements to take women's health.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did all of this training, and then it was kind of a matter of, what do I do with all of it? Like I felt like kind of like this, when you pan for gold and you keep shaking it and shaking it and shaking it. And I kind of just felt like, how does this fit? So that's kind of how that happened. And yeah, so then I started making contacts. So even though I'd lost all of these clients and it took a while to build back up, I was out kind of in a different area, making different contacts than what I had had, because I had primarily worked rehab for athletes, and there's a race, you can find a race here every weekend. Like there's always something, a triathlon, whatever. And so I went primarily on elite athletes is what I was doing. So it was interesting to transition into like the birthing community.
Yeah. It's a totally different vibe.
Mm-hmm.
When I first met you, you came to my Sell MFR to Anyone in Any Situation webinar. And at the end of that, everybody was kind of looking at me like deer in headlights. And I was like, okay, what objections do you have? Like, what would keep you from joining the program? And I believe one of the questions, which I thought was so valuable that you answered, was I haven't seen a return on investment from all of the education I've paid for, right? Like the education didn't create a lucrative business. How is this going to give me a return on investment? And I thought that was such a really smart question to ask. And I appreciated it so much because I was like, this is one of the reasons why we can't just do education for our skill level. We have to invest in other skills, which are the skills of knowing what to say, when to say it, how to say it to clients, and what are all of the things you need to do to overcome your clients' objections, right? So that's basically what I end up doing, is teaching you that side of this equation. You have excellent skills and trainings for your hands-on. Now invest in, how do you talk about and sell MFR? How do you meet people, talk to them and make offers to them? How do you price this? And at the end of the day, how do you overcome your clients' objections? And I think that's kind of how I answered it for you.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts when you asked me that question and I answered that for you?
So my initial thought when I posed that question was, I'm desperate. Like
Mhm.
I was to the point where I was like, I need to bring in some extra money. Maybe I need to find like a job working for someone. Like
Yeah,
my brain
sure.
was crazy. I had so much going on in my brain. So it was really a leap of faith to, and I did research before I came to that meeting. Like I spent a lot of time talking with Donna Height. She's wonderful. And I was
Mhm.
really like, this is my issue. And we talked back and forth. I was like, I really was like, I need to know if I make this investment that it's going to work, because
Yeah.
I'm so desperate and just really kind of at the end of everything. And the great thing about Donna is that she's wonderful. She's straightforward, and she's been in your program, I think, since you started.
Yeah, she was one of my one-on-one clients back in the day. Yep. Hmm.
So she could answer all of my questions about the program, as far as she's like, I've been in every
Yeah,
form
she's
that's
been in every iteration I've had. Yep. It's true.
exactly. And so when I came to that meeting, I was a little bit more calm because I was like, okay, Donna's not going to lie to me. She's going to tell me straight up. So then when you answered that question, I was like, okay, then let's see what it is. Let's make it happen.
hmm Yeah, it was an exciting question for me to get. And
Mhm.
also, the other thing is I think a lot of people are where you were. It's like you can feel this desperation for needing to know that it's going to work for you. And I think my thought about that is it will work as long as you're willing to work, right? You can't just pay the money and then not ever log into the course portal, not ever interact. You can totally pay the money and never get live coaching and get everything you need out of it. You can pay the money and not join the Facebook group and get everything you need out of it, as long as you are asking your business, asking yourself as the business owner, what does my business need? Right.
Mhm.
And then when you get the answer to that, you go to one of the modules in the course and you're like, okay, right now I don't believe that MFR works. So I'm going to start with the belief work and then go from there. Right. Or I really need my website to be improved. So you go and you do all of the website training
Right.
or whatever else. There's 8 modules, and then we have replays of every single coaching call I've done since 2021. So you could literally get 4 years of coaching to yourself. Like you could self-coach yourself through all of those calls, 4 years worth while you're in the program, which is insane. It's an insane amount of access. So
I mean, I was actually, even when I got in there, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much content in
yeah.
there. That's what really, I mean, I knew that there would be a lot of content, but like the amount of content, I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's a lot, which sometimes can be good and good or bad depending on how your brain works, right? Like some people look at that and they're like, "Oh shit, like I'm never going to get through this." And then they just
Mhm.
never look at it versus like most of the videos are very short, like all of the lessons are very short, actionable lessons, and you do not have to go through every single part of the modules because you might not need it all. You might have already set your rates, you might have already set your policies, you might have already designed your website. So maybe you just want to like skim through the website training to make sure your website reflects what that training does to see if you want to change it. And
Mhm.
the other things are like selling MFR. You might maybe you're fully booked, right? And you don't want to change your offer. So maybe you don't do that, but you go through selling MFR just to make sure your language is on par or can, could be improved or whatever for how you're talking to your clients. So there's really something for everyone, no matter what stage you're at, from like someone who's been in business for 10 years and someone who doesn't even have their doors open. It works for
Definitely.
everybody.
I mean, I will say it's been an interesting experience to go through things. And number one, like my brain is a lot more quiet. It was constantly thought, 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 thought. But as I'm going through and doing thought downloads or making models or whatever, I'm finding that it's more and more. There's not as many thoughts running through there, so it's not as exhausting. Like I was
Yeah.
exhausted, and I hate to say this out loud, but kind of bitter. And it's my own fault that I was bitter because I hadn't set boundaries of okay, this is what it is so that I won't hate going to work today every day. And I didn't hate it, but it just some days it was like,
Well, when you can't shut your brain off and all it's feeding you is toxicity, right? It is exhausting. It is overwhelming. And it is the main reason why people do feel overwhelmed. It's because of what they're thinking all the time. Can you
mhm.
speak to that a little more about how loud your brain was before and then what in the program helped to quiet your brain?
So it's so like constant, just constant bombardment. Like, I mean, so much to the point where, I would take classes, be at seminars, whatever, and they're like, center yourself. And I'm like watching the butterfly flit around from flower to flower kind of a thing. It just never stopped, even at night. Like I would just, and I found myself, I'm like, where did I become this? Where's the other shoe going to drop person? Like constantly, somebody be like, oh, I have something to tell you. I'm like, what's wrong? Like that
Yeah,
is
what did I do now?
right. Well, and that was it. Like everything. I'm just like, when I look at the way, like it was like everything all the time, never shut off. I'd lay there in bed. It would just be going, 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 going. And it was all I had, and I was always worried, like I was just telling this to Donna. I was like, I literally would find myself pleading, please God, I just need a couple more clients so I can make sure that I don't come up short this month. And it
Yeah.
was all the time. all the time. I could not focus on anything else. And like, I think one of the things that we talked about in the Cell MFR that I brought up is that my life became very, very narrow. Like, it was just about the business. And I would just be like, I have no energy for anything else, nothing. And so personal relationships or interests or hobbies or whatever. I remember one of my MFR friends, she's like, well, what does a fuller life look like to you? And I mean, I had an answer, but it was hard to come up with some ideas because for so long I've been so narrow. So when I got into coaching, and I'm trying to think one of the first like models I put together, it was kind of interesting. As I've done that, the thought downloads and the models, and I remember putting something down, and it was something about moving the business forward or whatever. And I made the comment, I'm like, oh, I'm not so exhausted. And Meg answered that. She was like, when you're doing something purposeful to move things forward, you don't have to use all this extra energy. I'm totally paraphrasing, and so I found like more and more as I'm doing that, I'm like, oh, I'm not having to deal with all of the stress, which caused me huge anxiety. I mean, chest hurt, everything. It was horrible, horrible. In fact, I was just telling Donna the other day, I was just like, this is the first time in over a year, like the last couple of weeks, in over a year, I have gone to bed and not worried about, do I have enough clients this week? Am I
Oh,
going to come up short?
yeah.
And I mean, to live under that all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, coaching has been, just for that alone, huge.
Yeah. Do you think you've already made your money back? Like, what is your thought about like the investment and this transformation that you've had in the first 40 some days?
Yes and no. So like, I'm like, okay, I kind of, when I factored in, like, this is the analytical part of my brain. When I factored in, I'm like, okay, it's not quite there, but it's close. It's almost there. Like, because it's ultimately repaying back, not a loan, but it's repaying back whatever. But yeah, as far as the transformation goes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, because don't you think you'll be able to make way more money with where your brain is at right now versus like basically what you were describing is you're drowning in the ocean and you're just like doggy paddling and then someone keeps throwing a baby at you or something. You're like
I
holding
mean,
bad babies and doggy paddling in the ocean,
I was literally just looking, I've looked at my calendar from last year and I'm comparing week to week. And I'm most weeks for the last month, most weeks I've made at least double what I did last year.
Amazing. Do you care if I share numbers that you've submitted to me?
No, go right ahead. That's
Okay.
fine.
So before we got on this call, we were just looking at what Cassandra has submitted through our portal. And what we do is like a weekly check-in. So people get a link, they fill out this report, and it comes back to us. And since she joined on November 8th, and it's December 21st, 2024, today when we're recording this, she's submitted $7,211 in revenue. $5,386 has been in the last 30 days. So the cost of the program was $3,000. So technically you've made your money back, like just
Yeah.
on the money you've submitted, which is amazing. But that's like just the first step, right? Like, okay, pay yourself back. Now, everything going forward is profit. So it's amazing. And then you've also submitted a lot of wins too. So what your first win that you submitted, I just want to read this because it was really good. I wonder if it'll let me read it from here. I can't see the whole thing, but it says, I was able to sell MFR in the form of 3 additional appointments this week because I was more specific and direct with my clients about MFR treatment and its results. Like that alone, like you made 3 extra appointments that first week you were in the program simply by taking what you learned in the free training and putting it into action, which is exactly what I want you to be able to do.
Yeah, that whole idea that I'm the professional in the room instead of letting them make the decision about, well, I don't know.
Yeah. It's like you just take all the heavy lifting away from the client. And it's not to be manipulative. It's to be like, here's what I see, which all patients are like, what do you see or feel? Like, tell me what's wrong with me, right? And we're not really telling them what's wrong with them. We're telling them where they're at. We're listening to what they want as a result. And then we're telling them how we believe they can get to that result and how long it's going to take.
And I think that too, like, it helped me be very direct. I could say, well, I think that, when they ask, hey, how many appointments should I book or whatever? And I say, well, start with this. It's kind of a out there, but to be very direct. And what I noticed too is let's recognize what you're improving on. either through what they tell me or what I'm feeling. So then I can say, okay, like I just had a client last night who has ringing in their ears. And so they're keeping a record of it on a scale of 1 to 10. And so I said, okay, read back, your last however many days. And so they were reading it back. They're like, okay, well, I was on the table with you last week. It was this, and then it was whatever. But I was able to point out after they told me that, I was like, okay, so this period of time, this 72 hours is your healing crisis, you want to say? I said, but look at after the 72 hours where you were at.
That's such a good data measurement tool that you're doing with having that log, and like the dedication that that client has to be writing that down. And then even when they write it down, they're still only going to remember like when they were suffering and how bad the suffering was, because when we're not suffering, we don't notice.
Exactly.
That's like the luxury of not being in pain, right? Like when you're not suffering, you're just like living your life. But then the minute you're suffering again, it's like, oh, I've been suffering this whole time. So having that log is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And your ability to be like, let's look at this data.
And that's what I've really been trying to do is look at what's going on. And then, like, I think we were just in a training call the other day where you were like, it puts a lot of pressure on them when you ask them, what are you feeling? Whatever.
Yes.
And
I hate it when people ask me like, don't ask me how I feel.
Exactly.
Like shit right now. Or I don't like, I'm annoyed or I'm stirred up or I have 10 million other things I got to get to. So quit talking to me. Yeah. Hey, MFR therapists, have you protected your practice yet? Running an MFR business isn't just about helping your clients to heal. It's about protecting your business too. That's why I created the MFR Coach's Legal Toolbox, a complete set of lawyer-drafted, customizable templates to make sure your practice and website are legally protected and fully compliant. Here's the deal. We've got 2 essential bundles. The website bundle for just $199. It includes your MFR website's terms and conditions, privacy policy, and disclaimer, and the policies and contracts bundle for $499, with all the must-have forms like your client intake, welcome letter, HIPAA disclosures, and special consent forms. Want the best deal? Grab both bundles and save $100. You get instant access, and every template is fully editable in Google Docs or Word. No more guessing if your paperwork holds up. I've got you covered. Ready to protect your practice? Head to the link in the show notes and grab your legal toolbox today. Because when your business is protected, you can focus on what matters most, helping your clients to heal. For a limited time only, when you enter the code podcast25 at checkout, you'll save an additional 25%. Enjoy.
And I was trying to do it before then too, but I've really made a conscious effort. It's like, okay, so I really need to recognize what I'm feeling while I'm working on them. So that when I go and say, hey, I would suggest, because, like I just had a client that came in post-surgery and we've been working, and I'm like, this is what I would suggest. You need to come in. And I was able to be very specific. And this is why. And once I'm able to be super specific and this is why, then it gives them the opportunity to say yes or no.
Yes. Yes.
Most say yes. I have had a couple no's, which is fine. Yeah. That's their choice.
And even with the no's, you can still be like, I'm just curious, but why are you a no?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I don't have time or I don't have money. But then you can answer those objections. Do you have time to be in pain? If you had a guarantee that this would work out, would you have the money for it? And sometimes people are like, yeah, I would, but I just don't believe it's going to work out. So then you can help educate them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's being willing to put yourself in a position where you might get feedback that you don't like to hear, right? But if you just tell yourself you're doing that on purpose and you love yourself through whatever words the client says, and you don't have to believe what they say if it's personal or whatever, but just putting yourself in that position and asking those questions allows you to ask better and better questions every single time you do this and come up with 100 different ways to overcome those objections or answer the questions. I recently have been doing this like in my own program, like for people who joined and then maybe they were never active. We found new ways to figure that out and reach out to people. So I sent probably 20 emails to people that I just noticed like haven't logged into the course portal. Maybe they never downloaded the private podcast, haven't really I don't know much about their business. So I sent emails knowing that like some people were going to say things that would probably hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of getting all butthurt about it, instead I'm like, this information is so valuable. Like if they're willing to email me and say words to me, I can take all of that and make my program better, because it doesn't do me any good if people, even if only 5 people don't do well or 20 people don't do well, that doesn't do me and the program and future students any favors. Like I want everybody to get across the finish line. So, and I think if you think about that when you're helping your clients too, is like, how do I get 100% of my clients across the finish line to their goal, or at least to 90% of their goal? And the way I'm going to do that is by having brutal, honest feedback and be listening to what people say, even when it's people that like are triggering to me or that they don't have finesse in the words that they're using to say it back to me, and just like loving everybody in that situation through it. Yeah. I even got one response that said like, I have to coach myself about you because you, like you, Heather, are like so triggering to me for like some other coaching that I had given that they didn't like. And hearing that was like, oh gosh, like don't spend any time trying to like me, basically was the response. Like, you don't have to like me to get what you need out of the program. I'm going to like you and coach you no matter what. Like, you don't have to like me in order for me to coach you, basically.
Yeah. And I think, and I've heard both you and Meg say, what if it's just words? And I'm not saying that this situation is just words, but I am using that a lot too. Like, what if it's just words? And I find that I don't get nearly as triggered about a lot of things, honestly, that I worked up over.
Yeah.
The time or the energy for that.
Isn't that so relieving?
Right?
Don't you feel like you enjoy your life outside of work more just by having that superpower?
Oh my goodness. Seriously. I'm like, what if it's just words? What if it's just words? I'm like, okay, if it's just words, I don't have to worry about it.
It's not your responsibility.
Right.
Yeah. I find that to be the most freeing. I remember when I was not freed from that, and I would like have to call my sister and be like, do you know what such and such said? And then I have to call my mom and be like, Mom, do you like, and it would be the same level of like stress and like vitriol. Like, it didn't get better by saying that stuff out loud. It got worse. And then I would be all worked up all the time, just like in that cycle. Now that's very rare. And I don't get anything out of like telling anyone else about it. There's no reward.
I mean, and I find if I don't have any energy behind it, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it just neutralizes it.
Exactly. I'm all about neutral. Like, seriously.
Yeah, getting to neutral. I think it's one of my favorite things. It's such a superpower to be able to do. Well, let's talk about some of the things you've been able to do in the last 40 days since you joined the program. What have you changed in your business? What are your plans?
Oh, so it feels like everything's kind of just shifting again. And I had kind of set a model, and now all of a sudden, like, I was trying to explain it. I don't know if I think it was one of the posts I put on the Facebook group. I was trying to change it. I feel like I'm looking at a different aspect, and there's things I didn't see before because the aspect has changed. So like one of the things that was really, a lot of the things that I'm noticing now while I'm trying to do the back end stuff is, oh, I'm going to set specific times that people can schedule appointments so that they just don't say, oh, I want to come in at this time or whatever. So I'm like, that's really freeing. Like, I'm feeling empowered, I guess would be the feeling behind it, because like I'm setting the schedule with specific times. So this is it. I'm writing out, like, these are my cancellation policies. And now that everybody knows, I'm not going to get the phone call that says, well, I just was too tired to come in today. Kind of thing. So that's set. As I'm doing that, it's like, now that it's there, everybody has it. Like, I don't have to worry because I can just say, okay, here's the policy. You can do with whatever. So that in itself is probably the most empowering, because, there were some things where I was just feeling bitter about, which is nobody else's fault but my own, truly.
Yeah. But it does seem like it's your client's fault when you're in that position, right? And that's why you get annoyed driving to work. We're like, oh, I hate all these people.
I mean, I was never like, I hate them, but
no, I'm being dramatic. I am being dramatic.
Yeah, but so the idea is like, it was just frustrating because it's like, oh, with this client, I know this is going to happen. And then I'm like, and I was actually listening to was it your over 10K, the call that you do with your...
Oh yeah, the 10K call.
And I was listening and I was like, because I really try to, when I'm on like the training, the calls, or I'm listening to calls, I look at them a couple of different ways. So I look at it as, what are they saying that I'm also feeling, reflecting? What can I get from them? So I don't necessarily have to be the one that's being coached. What can I get from them? Or on the flip side, I can listen to them. I'm like, that's something I don't want to do. Am I doing that right now and I need to change it? Or do I need to make sure that I avoid it?
Yeah.
And so I was listening to that call and I was like, I'm triggered because of this, but it's my own thing. It's not they're going to be the way they're going to be. So then that means that's me. So I need to work on me.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, I was like, yeah, all of this is very freeing. The back end stuff is very freeing because you don't have to feel bad or whatever because they're like, oh, but I didn't know. Like I just had somebody, and I had to go back, which is why I'm like writing the policies and procedures because I just had somebody that literally canceled and I'm like, I have a cancellation policy.
But did they know about it?
But when I went back through our interactions with each other, because it's not written down on my website and I couldn't find it in the text messages that we go back and forth, I might have verbally said it, but it wasn't there. I had no record of it. So then I had to say, okay, I can't enforce that because you didn't know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one layer stronger is you're going to hopefully purchase my legal bundle and you'll have a legal contract with all of your clients that literally lays out all of your policies and procedures. So there's never any confusion. Like you can't even get a charge back because this thing is so locked down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of in just the changes. I think too, like to sit down and say, okay, I just feel like everything's changing, which is great. I'm excited because like, I think as like my energy for everything has gone up, I've seen a lot more new clients, which I'm super grateful for. And it's been, and I've been trying to apply, like I've been applying, okay, this is what we're doing. This is my recommendation. And so I do see as things shift. And I had a client that I haven't seen in probably 2 years. And I had raised my rate shortly after the last time I saw her. It's just like 2 years ago. And so she contacted me and it was always kind of can I get a discount? Can I just discount? And I just said, my rate is this and we can do this amount of time. Let me know. And she was, that's fine. I was like, all right.
Amazing. How did that so empowering, right? Like when you're not confused about your policies and your procedures and when you work and when you don't work, your clients aren't confused either. It doesn't mean they won't ask, right? But your energy with that client was likely a way different form, right? For them to experience where they were just like, yep, okay, right? Like they took you really serious.
Yeah, they did. And even and I was just thinking, because I wanted to tell you, I'm going to submit it as my win this week.
I love it. I love reading your wins.
But, so on the training call earlier this week, and it was really hard for me to tell everybody what I wanted. This is what I want. And which was super, like, after I did, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, wow, I could do this. So the other day, my husband and I were talking, and I was like, this is what I want. And I was very specific about it. And it sparked this entire conversation of, well, then go get it. Like, there's
I
no
love that. And you were afraid to tell him, right? Like you were
I
afraid he would think it was silly or
that he's going to be like, oh, you can't do that, which he's my husband. And
he's your biggest fan. He wants you to win.
The most supportive through all of my MFR training. Like the year that I took Women's Health, like that was the last class I took that year. And I had taken 7 other classes plus other trainings.
Yeah, which is a huge investment, time and money wise. Yeah.
Just going to pay for class per class as the business could afford it. And he looked at me and he said, we can afford it as a couple. Like we have the monies, our personal monies. And that many classes, it's expensive. And the travel and all of that. So he literally, anytime I've said, hey, I want to do this, hey, I want to do that. Okay. He's never once said no, which was why, when I wasn't fully booked, prior to coaching, like,
isn't it funny though? Like your thoughts about like what you're thinking he's thinking are not anywhere near what he's actually thinking. Like you're thinking, oh, he's disappointed in me and he thinks I should be doing this. And it's like you're going to create your own torture versus just having the conversation. So I'm super glad you shared your goals and stuff with him. That's really fun.
Yeah. And I
He's
was
so
like,
excited for you.
I said it. I mean, it was hard for me to like, I had to take a deep breath because I was like, I have something to tell you. Like, I was like, okay, here, kind of a thing. But once I said it in, this entire conversation that we had, it was really, I even think it like helped our relationship too, because we were able to say, this is where we want to be, in the next 8, 10 years, whatever, too.
Yeah. I think it's so important to have those goals and just have the support as a couple, it's just, and also to feel supported. And I think sometimes, like, for us to feel supported, it doesn't really matter what our partner says or does for us.
Mhm.
We have to be thinking something that creates the feeling of support in us, right?
Right.
It's like it's up to us to feel supported by them based on how we're thinking about them, which is wild, right? Like if you're feeling unsupported, it's because you're thinking something really negative. I have to remind myself this too, because my brain tends to be quite negative. So I have to really be on to myself because my just default is just towards negative or like sarcastic, kind of like glass half empty type of thinking, which I think surprises people sometimes, but I think it's also a superpower to know that about myself. Like, oh, this is your tendency to look at things this way. And you have the ability to see things very clearly and neutrally when you're trying to do it on purpose. So I think anyone can do this with the tools that I teach in the program. So that's the good news. So now that you are very clear on your goal, would Cassandra 45 days ago, before we ever met, what would she be thinking about this goal that you've set?
Well, number one, I would have never said it out loud. It would have rattled around in the back of my mind, and I would never have once admitted it to anyone
Would
because
it
I
have
wasn't
felt
even willing
possible?
to admit it to myself.
Yeah. Would it have felt possible for you 45 days ago?
Oh, absolutely not. No way. No way, because I couldn't be honest with myself 45 days ago about what I really want. Like that is, I've really, really thought about this a lot. And I made, the unintentional model and I made the intentional model, but I really thought a lot about the download too, the thought download I did on it, because for years I have been making goals, if you want to call them that either somebody else wants me to do, so I don't believe in them,
Mhm.
or I haven't been really honest about what I want. So I'm making goals that I assign myself that I don't really believe in either. So why would I accomplish any of it?
Right.
Why would I put the energy into any of it? Because if I don't believe it, then, yeah, 45 days ago, no way. Mm-mm.
Yeah. So interesting. I'm really excited to have our follow-up podcast, like when you've been in the program for 6 months or 12 months and see where you're at. What is your income goal for the next 12 months?
So my income goal for the next 12 months, I really want to hit at least 100K, like minimum, because it's expensive to be a sole proprietor.
Have you ever hit 100K in your business before?
No,
What's your like best year?
my best year, I think, was 72,000.
Okay. And how many clients did you have to see a week to hit that?
And I've never seen, like, on average, it's always been less. See, this is where I hesitate to say it's always been less than 10 for the most part. Now, looking back, like, I'm seeing more in the last few weeks, like since I've been in the program, which is exciting. But also, too, I think probably my best year was actually COVID year. And the reason for that was that
People were around.
so many things were shut down actually in the state of California. And so I was getting calls and they were saying, I can't get in to see my doctor. I can't get in to see my PT. Can you help? And I was like, let's give it a go. The worst that can happen is nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that year I did really well that year. I had probably 2 or 3, like 10,000 plus months
Yeah.
just because nobody else was open.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think my best year was probably 72.
Okay. So this will be like so exciting to see you blow by that and like for $10,000 months to just be pretty normal. Like our first goal is to get you to a $10,000 month, then to repeat it, then to keep repeating it, right? Da 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 da. That will inevitably get you to 100K and then even beyond 100K.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, when I say I want to hit at least 100K, I mean, I would really like to be well beyond 100K, because then I'm just like, okay, because I can incorporate or whatever that's going to become, my accountant's like, I'm cheering for you. I'm rooting for you. Let's get you out of the sole proprietorship.
Yes. Well, the thing too with like setting these, like I know your big goal, and we'll share. I know we'll share that on a future podcast. But in order to get there, like you do have to have, 10K months or an average of 10K months. And then, to hit the 100K, you've got to, it's like I like to look at it as like stacked things, like mile markers, like, okay, I'm going to get fully booked. Then I'm going to be fully booked for 6 weeks. Then I'm going to be fully booked for 12 weeks. And it's just like, if you hit that, it's inevitable that you won't hit the 10, 12K months. And then you'll hit 100K and then 200K and so on and so forth. And the other thing to point out here is like, you're not trying to see 30 people a week, or even what's your fully booked number now at your new rate?
So my fully booked number is still 20.
Okay.
And originally when I originally set the number, I was like, it was higher. But then as I've listened to, and I'm like, okay, let me think about this. So it's 20.
Okay. But you could hit 100K with seeing 10 people at your new rate.
Oh, you totally hit 100K with seeing people.
Okay. So I just want to point that out because I think a lot of people hear us talk about money on this podcast, especially people that aren't really familiar with how my program works. And they think 100K or 200K equals working their asses off. And really, that's not the case. I'm never like, go work your fingers to the bone. Like, I want you to think about your business and going to your business during the week as the most easy and luxurious part of your day and of your week and of your month. So that's how we set up your business. So you are not hustling. And will you hustle? Yeah, there'll be times where maybe it's not even hustle, where you work hard, like you're working hard in your back end and you're having to like overcome a lot of thoughts about time and the effort to put into it and knowing where to start. And like I reminded you before we started coaching, it's really just like one decision, like you just make the decision and move on to the next decision. Make that decision and move to the next decision. And don't tell yourself that things are hard or that you don't have time or that it's too much. It's just like, what decision am I avoiding? And a lot of that is like setting your rate and then going back and recrunching the numbers because you're not sure it's perfect. It's like, no, set your rate. Maybe get coached on it. I'll ask you questions that will clear anything else up and just leave it for now and move on to the next thing. Don't do something and then go back and like try to prove yourself wrong. That's too time consuming. Yes. All right. Well, let's wrap up. I am so excited that you shared everything with us. Is there anything else you want to say maybe to people that are on the fence about joining coaching or they were where you're at? What would you say to those people?
I would say just, I do believe that it'll work. Like I can see it's working already. Mm-hmm. So, make the investment.
All right. Yes. Come join us. Enrollment is open now, so people can come on in. All right. Where can people find you?
So people can find me at sohnmfr.com.
Okay. And how do you spell that? You want to spell that out for everybody?
S is in Sam, O is in Oscar, H is in Howard, N is in Nancy, MFR.com.
Okay, perfect. Go find her and get an appointment if you're in the greater San Diego area. That would be amazing. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Cassandra. We will be back for another interview. And for everyone else, I'll be back with you next week on another episode of the MFR Coaches podcast. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a minute and rate and review the podcast. I appreciate it. For more information, please follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The MFR Coach. And check out my website, www.themfrcoach.com for more information. If you are currently not working 20 hours or less and making 6 figures in your MFR business, I want to help you change that. Make sure you tune into the show and get on my email list so you never miss out on important trainings and information. To be the first to find out when we are enrolling next for my 12-month Business Foundations coaching program, get on that email list at www.themfrcoach.com/join. Inside this program, you'll learn how to raise your rate, overcome objections, and sell MFR. You'll become the MFR therapist that never under-earns and never burns out. It's up to us to make MFR mainstream, and it starts with you and your successful MFR practice. See you next week.